So we're going to use some of the same concepts that we did when we were adding fractions that were numbers and with fractions now that have variables in it. So our first question is, what is a common denominator? So is there anything common between these two denominators? And the answer is yes. N is common. So I don't need to multiply these together and get an n cubed. If I make n squared as my common denominator, and then what number does 2 and 3 both go into? And that answer should be 6. So our common denominator for this variable is going to be a 6n squared. So when we talk about how do we change a fraction like 2m and a 3n squared, how do we change it so it looks common here? And what we want to do is first think about the number. So 3 times what is 6? That would be a 2. And since we have an n squared, we don't need to multiply it by an n squared. But we'd multiply the top also by 2. So if we multiply the numerator by 2, we'll have a 4m. If we ask us our same question with the 2n, how do I get a 2n equal to 6n squared? I need a 3. And n to become an n squared, I also need an n. So we're going to multiply both top and bottom by a 3n. So that would become 3n times 3 will be a 9n. And if we look at how do we add fractions, our rules for adding fractions are we add the numerators together. But when we look at our numerators here, we don't have any like terms. So actually our final answer is just going to be 4m plus 9n. Looking at the next example, again, our steps are still the same. We want to get a common denominator. So how do we get a common denominator between a 1 and a 6y? The easiest way to get a common denominator is to multiply the denominators together. So I'll just get a 6y. This fraction already has a 6y, so you don't need to do a single thing to it. We'll just make that a 3. How do we change a 1 to look like 6y? We're going to have to multiply both top and bottom by a 6y. And how do we multiply a 6y times a 3x? Multiply the numbers together first. So 6 times 3 is 18. And how do we multiply x and y together? We just put x and y together like that. Now we might have to reduce. And how are we going to reduce? Is there a number on the top that both of these go into? And 3 is it, so we're going to factor that 3 out. On the bottom, if I write 6 as 3 times 2y, I can now reduce because 3 over 3 is 1. And so final answer this time will be a 6xy plus 1 all over 2y. So one of the tendencies is to cancel out some y's. If every term in the top doesn't have a y, that will become your final answer. Number 3 is a subtraction problem, but remember the rules are the same if we have a subtraction or an addition problem. It doesn't matter. We just make sure that we have a common denominator first. So you can see that the 3 is common in both of these, so we'll have a 3 as my common denominator. We don't have a y squared in both, so that will become part of my common denominator. Think to yourself, how am I going to change these so they look the same? So this 3y squared has that already as its common denominator, so we don't have to do anything. This 3 needs a y squared to look like this, so we're going to multiply top and bottom by that y squared. So we get minus y times y squared is a y cubed. And final answer, since again we'll have x plus y minus 2y cubed. None of these look alike, so that will be the most simplified. We can do the top, and the bottom we'll just write as a 3y squared. Again, some of you are going to want to try to cross off some of these y's, but because this x does not have a y, this will be our final answer. Try number 4 on your own, and I'll walk through the steps, but I won't talk through the steps, and then we'll see if they get any more complicated. Now, number 5, we have a bunch of things going on. So the common denominator that we're going to use is we just multiply these two denominators together. And we're going to make each one of these fractions look like the other. So how do I do that? Well, this fraction has a 2m, or m plus 2. It doesn't have the 3n minus 2. So we're going to multiply the bottom by that. Oh, and we're going to multiply the top by that. So the new numerator becomes a 6n plus 4. And again, where did I get that? Distribute through. This second fraction has a 3m minus 2, but it needs a m plus 2 to look like this. So that means we've got to multiply the top by m plus 2. Again, use the distributive property. 2 times m is a 2m, and a 2 times 2 is equal to a 4. Let's check to see if anything looks alike in the top and the bottom. You'll be able to keep your answer just like two binomials. On the top, the only thing that looks alike to me is this 4 and this 4. So this will be an 8 of those. And how do I combine 6n and 2m? They don't look alike. So final answer will just be all of this. So again, this is a little bit more complicated, but the whole idea of common denominators is going from our fractions that had numbers, and then we're going fractions to variables. I'm going to go down and do one more problem, problem number 6. Again, what I want to try to do is walk you through the steps. To get a common denominator with variables, the easiest thing to do is multiply the two bottoms together. And then look at these fractions as far as how do I make this look like this. I'll need to multiply this by an x minus 2, and that means you have to multiply the top by x minus 2. So distribute through and changing that variable. This has an x minus 2. It needs a 2x minus 1, so I'll multiply by a 2x minus 1 on top and bottom. Again, why does that work? Because this fraction right here is just 1, and multiplying something by 1 doesn't change anything. Distribute through. 2x times a 2x is a 4x squared minus a 2x. Now the last step is to look at anything that looks common. And on the top, we actually do have a common term now. Again, you can leave the bottom as two binomials multiplied together. I do have a x term and an x term here that look alike. And typically when you write final answers, you put them in order as far as your powers go. 3x minus 2x will give us plus 1x, and then minus a 6. You can leave final answer just like this. For right now, you can leave 7 and 8 blank, and we'll try those when we first get into class.